Good morning and welcome to another episode of Marlins Monday. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. It is Monday, July 14th, and there is a lot to talk about today with the Marlins finishing up their first half and headed to the All-Star break this week. But before we do get into that, I do just want to remind you guys to like, comment, and subscribe. It does help what we do over at the channel here at 5 Reasons Sport Network. Covering the Marlins, the Heat, the Panthers, the Dolphins as training camp opens up later on this week. Inter Miami, the Hurricanes, all of it. If it's South Florida sports, we got to make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I want to get into it right away here with the Marlins. It was a bit of an up and down week. You started off with 2 games against the Reds that you looked far superior. Then you lose 3 straight between the last 2 games of the series in Cincinnati and the first game in Baltimore. And the way that it happened, the bats just completely went dormant against left-handed pitching, which is, I think, a real concern for this team at this point, is the way that they handle left-handed pitching. They do not hit those guys well. And as much as maybe traditional wisdom says you want as many righties in the lineup against those left-handed pitchers, I think when you have guys like Stowers and Hicks sitting on your bench, I think you're not giving yourself the best chance to win that day with your offense. Those are guys that just, they hit the ball lefty, righty, and the righties that you're bringing in for them, I mean, you're bringing in Derek Hill and Eric Wagaman. I don't really see the upside there against lefties with those guys. At least it hasn't borne out yet. So that's a bit of a concern, but the Marlins do bounce back with a couple of commanding victories against the Orioles in Baltimore. So 4-3 week overall. About, I think, par for the course for this team. I was on the Fish on First live stream prior to the Cincinnati series, and I predicted a split for the Marlins. It kind of ended up going exactly how I thought, where you had Jansen Junk and Yuri Perez going in the first 2 games, and you felt really good about your opportunities there to take the first 2. And then it was Sandy and Cal Quantrill, and those 2 guys certainly are not advantageous pitching matchups, especially not when you're staring down Andrew Abbott and Nick Lodolo on the other side with the Marlins, the way that they've been struggling against left-handed pitching to this point. But I do want to touch on just a few things here in the first half. Firstly, I don't think we can talk about the way that this first half ended without talking about Kyle Stowers and just the season that he's had to this point. Firstly, a phenomenal game on Sunday. He goes 5 for 5, drives in 6, hits 3 homers. Just a tremendous showing for Stowers in Baltimore, of all places. So that's got to be a little extra sweet for him. But Kyle Stowers this season, 293 average, 891 OPS, 19 homers, 54 runs batted in. He certainly looks like an all-star. And I mean, between him and Ramirez, I think, have been your 2 biggest bright spots among position players in the first half. Liam Hicks has been a revelation as a Rule 5 draft pick who's far exceeded expectations. I think Dane Myers still in the aggregate has probably exceeded his expectations to this point. Otto Lopez has been pretty solid since moving over to shortstop, although we'll see what that ends up looking like down the road as we talk about who the Marlins selected in the draft a little bit later on in the stream here. But aside from what you got from Stowers and the position players, it was really the starting pitching that I think set you up to really have a great last 2 games in Baltimore between Jansen Junk and Yuri Perez, both guys going 7 scoreless, doing it a little bit in different ways. Junk kind of pitching the contact, Yuri with a little bit more swing and miss. Although Yuri had an uber efficient 84 pitches through 7, he could have gone longer if needed, but in a 10-run game where you're up 11-1, there's just really not a need for that. But you go back and you look at the Marlins here in their last 3 starts combined between Jansen Junk and Yuri Perez. Those two guys have given you 37 innings pitched, just 3 earned runs, a .73 ERA. Right now, those two guys are far and away your best 2 in the rotation. Edward Cabrera has been fantastic as well, so he gives you a pretty strong 3-headed monster atop the rotation right now with the way that all those guys are going. Cabrera left after 4 innings on Friday against Baltimore. A little bit of elbow soreness, so everybody kind of was collectively holding their breaths. Although the Marlins seemingly got good news on the MRI with Clayton McCullough, kind of confirming on Sunday that the Marlins are expecting him to be able to make his next start after the All-Star break with the extra layoff there. So really good sign for the Marlins that Cabrera is going to be healthy, whether they decide they want to keep him or whether they decide they want to trade him. I think both options are still very much on the table for this Marlins team. At 44 and 51, I don't think that they're going to, suddenly become buyers or anything like that. As I've mentioned time and again, I think that this is a time for them to be disciplined in their approach and what they want to do with this team. And they're going to continue to do that. They're going to continue to build through the minors and build up that organizational depth. And, it's kind of like pouring water into a cup. Eventually it's going to overflow. And in this case, the minors is the cup and the major league roster is the overflow. If you keep pumping enough in, eventually it's going to come to the top and it's going to come to the surface. And that's what I think the Marlins are kind of hoping for with their approach to the way that things have gone this year for them. And it's really interesting with Cabrera what they decide to do, because I think regardless of what happens with him after the deadline, they're going to have probably about two starters. Ryan Weathers is going to be returning sometime in August, and Robbie Snelling went 5 innings scoreless in his first AAA start. I think he's a guy that if he pitches well in his first 5 or 6 starts at AAA, that they make the call on him. So the rotation, you could be looking at a rotation here of Perez, Cabrera, Junk, Weathers, and Snelling here in the near future. And that's not even to speak of guys like Thomas White on the horizon, Braxton Garrett on the mend. Max Meyer, I think, will be back as a reliever when he does make his return to the big league roster from injury next season. You've got Noble Meyer, you've got Carson Milbrandt. There's some really interesting prospects in the lower levels of the minors between their international players. But speaking of the minors, the Marlins did make their first 4 selections in the MLB draft on Sunday night, and it was a pretty interesting quartet of players. They quadrupled down on college bats, starting with Ava Arquette, the 6'5" shortstop from Oregon State. Arquette hailed as the best college bat in the class, right-handed power-hitting shortstop, hit .354 this past season at Oregon State, 19 homers, 54 runs batted in. He's a guy that really projects as close to major league ready with the bat, maybe a little bit more swing and miss than you would want, but ultimately the approach plays, the power plays. He definitely plays up to his size as far as the power goes. And the one thing that you do wonder with him is whether or not he sticks at shortstop long term. I've seen second base projected for him, third base projected for him. If the arm is good enough for short, I think the arm is going to be good enough for third base, which is where I would project him long term overall for this team, especially at the size that he is. but I really like the decision to go with a right-handed power bat. I think outside of Ramirez, you don't have a lot of that in the organization. You've got Davison De Los Santos, but he's kind of struggling right now at AAA. You've got Kemp Alderman at AA, who's, again, a nice piece, but you want more of that organizational depth, and I think that Arquette gives you that right-handed power in spades and can be a guy who can really create a formidable middle of the order between him, Stowers, and Ramirez down the line for you. Their second pick at 43 was Clemson center fielder Cam Canarella. And listen, I'm over the moon about this selection. Canarella was a guy that I think on lottery night when the Marlins fell from 1 to 7, my initial reaction was, well, all over the place. But at a certain point, it was okay. Let's go get Cam Canarella at 7. That's where I was with him in December. 6 foot, 180, left-handed center fielder for Clemson. The glove is just tremendous. He's a big league caliber center fielder right now. He might be a Gold Glove caliber center fielder right now. He doesn't have the best arm in the world, coming off of shoulder surgery on his right shoulder, so maybe the arm isn't what you would want it to be, but I mean the range in the outfield is just fantastic. And he's a guy that's going to collect hits. He was a 353 hitter at Clemson, walked more than he struck out this past season. Career 350 hitter at the college level. I think that there's a little bit more power than the 5 homers would belie. He did hit 7 his freshman season at Clemson. So I think he's a guy that might have 12 to 15 home power at the big league level and hit close to 300, 310. He really kind of reminds me in terms of just overall frame and approach at the plate. Granted, I don't think the power is going to develop for him quite like it did for Christian Yelich, but that's kind of who I see him as in center field. And that's really, I mean, lofty praise, but I think that the hit tool is going to flash right away. This is a guy that he may very well be the quickest to the big leagues of all the Marlins selections. Just because I think the bat plays right away, and I think the bat and the glove play right away. Like the glove is top tier in the draft. He's going to come in and play a really good center field for you. And I think the approach at the plate is really solid to the point where, I think you're looking at mid-2026, Cam Canarella is knocking on the door or on the major league roster by, June, July next season. The next selection is Brandon Compton, a power-hitting outfielder out of Arizona State. Compton, kind of a tale of two seasons. His freshman year, he hit 354, 19 homers, 53 runs batted in, almost a parallel season of what Ava Arquette did here recently at Oregon State. But last year, the numbers do kind of tail off. He hit 271 with 9 homers. But he wasn't striking out much more. He struck out about the same amount. He walked a little bit more, and then he put on an absolute show at the combine. I mean, the exit velocity leaderboards were just Brandon Compton, Brandon Compton, Brandon Compton, Brandon Compton, some other guy, Brandon Compton, Brandon Compton, Brandon Compton. So the power is legit, 55, 60 grade stuff. And it's really going to be a matter of how well he can develop that hit tool. Not very good in the field. He doesn't really do much else other than hit and hit for power. So I think that this is a guy who can be your first baseman going forward. I think that that's probably where I would project him long-term with this organization, is a guy that can kind of be your power bat at first base. Big lefty, 6'1", 225, strong kid. And he's going to be an interesting prospect to track for the Marlins here. And then their last selection was Max Williams out of FSU. Outfielder with experience playing all three outfield spots, will likely settle in at one of the corner spots. 6'2", 207. Sneaky athlete, but again, another left-handed power bat for the Marlins. This is a guy that hit 19 homers, 14 homers, 51 runs batted in, 316 average. Although the strikeouts were a little concerning, striking out 98 times this past season at Florida State. But again, another power bat added to this system. And it really kind of tells a story for I think what the Marlins see in the organization and see for their future moving forward. Because I think you look at the Marlins and their organizational strategy, I think you figure out a couple things. Number one, they're really happy with their pitching depth. Clearly, I think that they believe in Snelling and White and Meyer and even a guy like Milbrandt. And then some of the guys that they took last season, Nate Payne, Grant Shepherdson, some of those guys that they really like at the minor league level. And then secondarily, when you look at their position players, I don't want to say that there's it's hard to really call it a pattern just yet, but I'm beginning to think that there might be a pattern emerging where, instead of drafting high school players, you just supplement your position players in the minors with international free agents. Let those guys fill up your minors or your lower levels. And then you draft college bats to continue to supplement your mid to upper levels of the minors. Because the Marlins have gotten some really positive results early on out of their IFA signings. And I think that they've been really pleased with that. And I think that this draft shows you that they're really pleased with that they feel comfortable with the guys that they have in the lower levels of the minors. And then lastly, this is a team that they think they're ready to compete in 26-27. You don't take 4 college bats if you don't think that those guys are going to make an impact next year or the year after. And if you're drafting guys to make that impact, you're starting their big league clock, their service time clock, you're anticipating that you're going to be good in the next year or two. And it's encouraging to see that they're willing to speed up a little, at least a little bit, their timeline for contention and kind of be dynamic in the way that they process new information and the results that they've gotten to this point. So it's a really interesting draft for the Marlins so far. Today, day 2 starts at about noon, where they will go through rounds like 5 through 20. It's going to be a long day of Marlins draft picks there. And All-Star Weekend starting up, Home Run Derby tonight, All-Star Game on Tuesday, and then the Marlins are off until Friday when they play the Kansas City Royals. And that is all I have for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's going to be a really interesting weekend series against the Royals. Hopefully the Marlins will come out in the second half, more the way that they finished the first half. And we will see you guys next time. We will be there every step of the way here on Marlins Monday. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.